So in my opinion, the miracles are much more... Hey guys, it's John here in my living room, and I thought I'd hop on real quick and talk about this concept of the miracles, the Jeshua miracles. People often ask me if I have memories of the miracles. And the interesting thing about it is I don't. I have no memory of miracles being performed. And what I think is so interesting about that fact is that when you look at the history of the stories of the miracles, they have become very mythological and very used to promote him as a Messiah, as someone greater than us. And what he found was his own enlightenment, his own divinity within. But the concept of him creating miracles was all about the idea of manifestations themselves, right? But I think he was just like us. He was a man just like us. And when I look at my memories of the man, first of all, the majority of my memories are of us laughing, like on the side of a road somewhere, just laughing and having those moments of just giggling until we cried. It was that sort of fun, joyous expression. But when it comes to seeing miracles, the only one that I've ever thought was miraculous was him picking up a lamb with a broken leg. And I assumed he set it. He set the leg and gave it back to this young girl who was upset. And it was a healing of the young girl who was crying over the broken leg of the lamb. So when you look at the concept of miracles, you start to look at walking on water and all of these miraculous healing stories. Now, he himself said in the Bible, it is your faith that heals you. He never said it was he that healed you. He never once said that. So the miracle of Jeshua was the empowerment of you. Coming out and saying, look, these are things you can create into your experience. Greater works than I have done, you will do. It is your faith that heals you. You can ask mountains to move, it'll move. Nothing's impossible for you. He doesn't say him. So these stories of miraculous things being shown in front of large crowds and things of that nature, they're more mythological than they are actual miracles. They're stories. They're stories to create. They're stories to create him into a Messiah, to create him into some deity that we must bow down to. And when you dive into the teachings of what he actually says, and once again, I'm using the word actually, but and I'm putting quotes around that because the Bible itself is a convoluted mess of various texts compiled together hundreds of years after the life of Jeshua. So when you look at these miracle stories, you find very quickly that there's not a lot of contemporaneous accountings of it. You're not going to find a bunch of other people talking about these miracles. It's all in the Bible text. There's not other Roman writings or Jewish writings of the period saying, hey, this guy did this here. It's strictly the Bible. It's strictly in that text that is deifying the man into something greater than man. And what he was teaching was our own divinity, our own ability to create our life, our own ability to live into an expression of being one with God and being one with love and living into a loving world. Someone recently just put a comment on one of my other videos on the other channel about his references to hell. And what's interesting about those references to hell is the references to hell that are being cited as his, once again, were written hundreds of years afterwards. And they used the terminology of fire and brimstone. And those fire and brimstones did not happen in the text until after the Middle Ages, because prior to that, hell was just an emotional torment. It had nothing to do with a physical place with levels and fire and brimstone and all those things. So all of those things were added much later in a much more mythological sort of structure. When you start looking at the people in France who say Mary Magdalene came here and raised her family here and all that was people in France in the Middle Ages wanting to make France part of the biblical story. And so people added things. We go into, I think it's Mormonism, where they believe Jesus came to America and preached to the Native Americans, right? This is one more mythological story that's creating this idea that Jeshua was more than a man, and he showed up and was teaching here because of that is what makes that religion valid. And when you look at it from that perspective, you start to find out that people are just manipulating the stories and creating stories to make themselves feel good about their belief systems or to legitimize their belief systems. So the miracles, when you hear people talk about it, to me, they're probably great embellishments of manifestation stories of other people. The story of walking on water. Jeshua walks up walking on water. Peter steps out and walks a few steps and then sinks. And he says, "Oh, ye of little faith," right? Well, Peter stepped out and supposedly walked. Now imagine if this was, I'm manifesting a loaf of bread, and Peter manifests a loaf of bread, but he tears it open, and inside of it's full of weevils. So, oh, ye of little faith, you didn't manifest good bread. So, creating and manifesting things in your life. I am a firm believer that I can create anything in my life and do so on a regular basis. And but I'm not creating gigantic miracles. I'm just creating, period. I'm just creating. Even in the modern New Age, the idea of miracles and manifestations comes out to this idea of, is my world a place where my thoughts are creative, which every religion in the world almost says. Buddhism says it, and Hinduism says it, and Christianity says it, and even modern pop culture says it. Shakespeare said it in the Renaissance. It comes down to this idea that we are creating. And miracles per se are just foretold manifestations, or just manifestations in general, things that seem impossible, things that we couldn't see the synchronicities happening, and then it did. So the embellishment of miracles, the embellishment of manifestations, in my opinion, is what miracles are. They've taken these stories and they've grown them up to these large mythological, miraculous stories to make you believe. But I think in blowing them up into these gigantic, miraculous, mythological stories, we've created a new problem where we, who being told by our religion that we're not worthy and we're less than God, less than Jeshua, means those miracles are something we can't attain because they're too big, they're too daunting, they're too giant, they're too mythological for the reality of our world to actually comprehend them and create them into something. So my personal opinion is the miracles are much more myth than they are truth. And when we come down to the idea of what did he teach, he taught us to love one another, and he taught us that our thoughts we create our world. And the idea of putting him on a pedestal or raising him up to say he's the only way to God would be completely antithetical to everything he taught. So, and I think his life was miraculous. I think his life was miraculous because what did he do? He miraculously showed us our own personal divinity through his. Take heart, I have overcome the world. Meaning, look, I've overcome this illusion. But you don't say take heart to somebody unless you're saying to them, you can do this. Take heart, you can do this. Take heart, I've overcome the world, so can you. That's the things he was saying. Ye are gods. So when you look at this from the perspective of were they miracles or were they myth, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is him telling you that you're the one who's divine, you're the one who creates in your world, and you have the ability to create anything at any given time. And are the miracles real? I believe it was a miracle. But what was the miracle? That he came and showed us we are the miracle. And that's my thought. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.